Good evening. I'm Pieter Eijgermans from Holland and the Netherlands, and I work for Ordina. I'm a codesmith and I'm also a front-end developer for the department GS Roots of Ordina. And I start with my talk now. That's okay. I want to talk about React and React hooks. I show you a simple application. I want to so you can learn a bit about a few hooks. React is simply a library for building user interfaces, and it is okay. You know it already. It is built by Facebook, and it is now at version 17.0.2. What I want to talk about is first, I start with what's a component in React. I start very simple, and then I explain a little bit about what is the ASICs and what is functional and class components, what's the differences, what are the pros and the cons. And I want to show you how to build a product cart with a shopping cart inside of it. And I show you some hooks. Use state hook, use your user hook, use effect hook, and the custom hooks, how you make that. Now let's start. You can clone my application from this repo. I place this URL also at the end in the chat, and also, And what is a component? Components are independent and reusable bits of code. In React, a component is nothing more than a function which receives data and which outputs, renders a view. You can say it very simple. You have in React, you have comes with two types of components. You have in React a class component and function components. Class components, they are used in old code bases. They are stateful and mainly smart components with lifecycle methods and local state. The downside of class components is that difficult to share logic and difficult to share state. It's difficult to read, not so easy to test. Function components are cleaner and more concise, more readable, better testable, because it is simply a function. Here I have made a diagram of it. So you have functional components and class components. Class components has state inside of the component, and class component have lifecycle methods for mounting, updating, unmounting. And function components don't have lifecycle methods, but function components has a lot of other things. It is stateful. Function components can also be stateless. Function components and class components can also be a smart component, of course. And function components has, you can use hooks inside of it, sharing logic, easier to read, easier testable, and we will see it later on. And you can use hooks, of course, and functional programming style is the main style of programming. Let's first talk about what is a class component. Here I show you a very simple component with class, and you also give it a name with a capital letter always. You have to start with a capital letter, and it extends from React.component, so we can use all the logic from React component to make a component. We have to implement a render method. I will show you later what is inside of it. And this component, we can call this component, instantiate this component in the HTML via this tag. You see the same class component, but then in the render function, we return here HTML in combination with JavaScript. HTML in combination with JavaScript, we call this JSX. So here we, in curly brackets, we have JavaScript. What do we do here? We, in the HTML, I define here a product with a property message and with the value nice. And here with this props, I can get the value nice. So I'm rendering I'm a nice product. Function components. I simply can also define it a little bit the same way with the function before it, for example, with a capital letter always, and you can receive properties inside of it to render something. This is also JSX style. Okay, we export, of course, the product, so you can import it in another component. Components are like JavaScript functions in React. So you, it is nothing more than a function. Data comes in, and a view will be returned. How do we render a component? Render a component in React. We can use the React DOM.render, and this method has two arguments now, and the entry component. This is a product component, and we have also a HTML root element. It can be here in index HTML. So this product component will be placed there. Let's go further. You can have components in components, of course. Here a component and product component inside of it. You see the same structure in the in code. So you can say, okay, DOM render. We start up the application, and we define here our entry component. This is our entry component. It will return this JSX, my shopping cart. And I call here also another function, another functional component, product component with the property message, which will be defined here. This new component. I am a red product. So this is the starting point of the application. We are going to make. You have to place all your components, each component in a separate JS file. And now I want to step over to my tutorial. I want to make a product component with hooks. It has a shopping cart and also a products part to select the products. It looks a little bit like this. So you can counting up and select something, you can order something. And here you have the shopping cart here upstairs. I'm going to explain, okay, the tutorial, what are hooks? I'm going to explain. I'm going to explain the use state hook, how we going to use it here, use your user hook and the use effect hook, and how to make a custom hook. What are hooks? Hooks allow us to hook into features such as state. State is nothing more than the memory of your application, and it refers to the data that needs to be tracked in your application. And it can hooks can also handle side effects like updating the DOM or fetching data from the network. Why hooks? Hooks let you split up one component into smaller components, and it's easy testing and stateful. It can reuse stateful logic. Let's look how we do that. Let's start with the use state hook. We start by implementing this hook to update the state in my application. So first we import the use state hook from React. And then here you can use state hook, and the use state hook will return your state variable and also return the method, the function to update a state variable. And I also pass here a initial value, and this will be the red color, a string. Okay, we use it in this first application. Here I define a functional component with the name favorite color. Define here my use state. I always define the hooks at the top of my functional component. One thing I want to say is that you can only use hooks in functional components, not in class components anymore. You cannot use it there. Here I define my color. and also my set color function. Here I render my favorite color, and I've here defined a button, an on-click event. And with this, here I trigger the function set color, which is defined here via the use state hook, and it will update the color to blue. So my favorite color is blue, will be printed here. So what I say, hooks can be called inside React functional components only, and can only be called at the top level of the component. So always at the top, it is defined here. And hooks cannot be conditional. And this is our shopping cart we're going to make here. I started with the creating the product components. First, I define here my functional component with name products, and I return here the JSX shopping cart with how much items, 0 items, total price 0, and 2 buttons for adding or removing a product from my cart. This is the cart again. Here I use I define here in my application 2 state variables, a cart variable for the cart items, here upstairs, 18 items I've selected here. And also a total for the total cost, total price. It has an initial value of 0, the total price, and the cart array have initial empty array. You see the next step that we are going to create the functional component. And I use here the use state hook, which I've shown you already, to define the cart and the total. And I also define here a add function where I use the set cart and set total from the use state hook. Here I receive make use of an anonymous function. I work here with the current state, and what I use here is also the spreading operator. So with spreading operator, I spread the current array, and I place and add the new product at the end of the array. And the total is quite simple. Here I render the shopping cart again with the cart length. Now I loop here through the products. Products are defined here, hard-coded, with the name and the price, and I map through it here. And what do we do it for every product I can click and I can add a product. The add function will pass a product to this function. Also, we'll call the set cart function to update the state of the cart and the total, so the cart items can be rendered and the total price can be rendered now. For a little bit more complex state management, we use reducer hook. Reducer hook accepts 2 arguments, a reducer function, and an initial value. So an example of the reducer function is a cart reducer, for example, and it always has always receives a state and a property, in this example, a product. So how does that look like in my application? I use the use reducer hook for more, I can make use of the cart reducer. I defined it already here downstairs. And I define here my cart state variable and total state variable. I make use of the use reducer with the total reducer for calculating the total price. This is the second step, how I change the application to make use of it. I define here, the product component with the use reducer hooks. And I define here my add function, a little bit same I've shown you already. And I make use of these cart reducer and the total reducer. What I render here is the same. stays the same. I want to show you also I want to pass an action object. This is the best way to do. There's a very common pattern in reducers to pass action objects. So you can make more logic, better logic for your application for state management with action objects. So now in the left-hand side, I made use of a reducer hook. And you've seen it already. It's a simple function I use here for adding a product with the set card. But now I want to use an action object. And how do we use that? Here in the set card, with curly brackets, I pass here an action object with two properties, a product and a type. And also I created a remove function with a type remove. How can we use this? In the application, we can make use of the reducer hook, of course. And we can also, I define also the add and the remove function. And I pass here an action object with a product and a type. When I call an add function, I will call the set card function, which will also pass the action object with the product and type. It will pass the action object to the card reducer, which will be here inside the action. And the action type will, I can switch to the add case to add a product with the spread operator. Or I can, for the action type, I can switch to the remove type to find my product I want to, with the product name. I find the product I want to remove. I make a copy of my state here. I splice my the product out of the array, and then I return the updated state here. So this is a good example to show you how you can make with reducer hook. You can make complexer logic for your state management. A little demo. It's only code. Let's see. This is a little bit samification. You have still hard-coded products. And I make use of the card reducer hook, which has a lot of logic inside of it. More logic than you can use with use a state hook. You cannot do this. And here I make use of the use reducer hooks. Use effect hook. Use effect hook is you can use that for performing side effects in your application. For example, for fetching data over the network, and for updating the DOM, or logging, or updating the local storage. How do we use this effect? This use effect hook? It has two arguments. You can pass the function to it, and you can pass a dependency. Dependency is very important also. I will explain to you how. Here I updated my product function, and I make use of a user hook. You know how we use this. And I also define here a use effect hook. And this use effect hook will handle a side effect. What kind of side effect? It will, via the set products, it will fetch product data via the network. And it will, via the set products function I've defined here, via use state, I place it in the products state object. You have to define here also a dependency. I've shown you already. It can be empty, but it can also be an empty array. And it can also be a filled array with a dependency inside of it. When you use it this way, then the use effect will only render the first time. I can show you that. And you, for example, something inside of it. Here, I defined the use effect hook. Here you see the application. It is still running normal. Here in the console log, you have to look when you remove this dependency. And then you see it is counting up. It is rendering and also re-rendering itself. And that is the normal flow of a hook, because when you call a hook, it will re-render your component after the hook is fired, and after when you have fetched something, fetch data, for example, then it will re-render itself to show the products in the card, and it will loop and loop when you remove this dependency. When you add brackets, it will only render at the first time. So when I add brackets, it is stopped, you see, re-render itself. Also, a sheet about this. When no dependency is passed for the use effect, then it runs on every render. You've seen it. It loops then. And when you use an empty array here, it runs only on the first render. And when you define here a property, it runs at first render, and at any time this property is changed. Can be any property. Custom hooks. How do you make hooks? Your own hooks. I want to make a custom hook with the use of the other. I want to reuse my own hooks inside of it. How do we do that? The advantage of custom hook is also you can reuse it in other components. Let's create one. I want to reuse my use state hook and reuse reducer hook. How can I reuse that? I can create a separate JavaScript file for all my hooks I created until now. And I return the data and the function from our custom hook. And so I can also import the hook. I can show you it, how I do that. I created here a separate file, and I place here all my state hooks here inside of it. My custom hook has the name use state hooks. And it has, you see it here, I define here my user hook with the card variable, and also use state hook with the products. And I return here the card and products and the set card and set products. So I can reuse this use state hook in another component. I also have to export it so I can import it in another component. The card reducer is also placed here, of course, because card reducer is used here in the use reducer. Let's go to the code. How do we make this? Here I have the product cards, and I have here made a separate file, use state hooks. And here you see the same code, some use state hooks. Here I define my use reducer, use state, and I return here everything I need, which I can use. And I export my whole use state hook here. So I can, because I exported here, I can also import it here, the use state hooks, my custom hook. This is. And here I can, here at the top of the function, this function component, I can use the use state hook, my custom hook, and I can, it will return the card and the products and the set card and the set products. This is, I can return this by destructuring, they call this also. And here I can use the set card and the set products again in my effect of also. So my code is much cleaner now. Okay, this is also what I told you already. You can import it in your component, of course, and use it this way. The demo I showed you already, and this was my talk, little talk about what is a component, and what are functional components, class components, and how to use this use state, and how to use the use reducer and the use effect hook, and how to make custom hooks. So this was my talk. I have also written a lot of articles on DSON, also about React, how to make hooks. This is another tutorial, not this tutorial, another tutorial about to change your application and how to use hooks. So, okay, this was my talk. Thank you very much. Are there questions?